everybody, this is Perch, and I'm here with Joe. Joe, how are you doing?
I'm all right, Perch. How are you?
I'm doing great. We have the great privilege to be joined by Eric Luke today. How are you doing, Eric?
I'm very well. Thanks for asking. Howdy, folks.
Yeah, we've been very excited to talk to you. There's a bunch of cool things that we get to talk about today with you, and kind of your work in comics and in TV and everything else. But I wanted to kick it right off. Like, how did it feel to adapt the Demi Moore Patrick Swayze movie for Dark Horse with Ghost?
Yeah, that was a hard one. You know, how do you translate that scene with the pottery into comics? Yeah, it was real tough.
I bring up. I remember they had put out this shared universe. We definitely want to talk to you about Ghost, and it's one of the a lot of people really love that book, and of course the art was gorgeous on it and everything. And it was one of the few times when I had somebody come back with the book, upset though, and go, "This is nothing like the movie." And like, well, yeah, it was a love book, but I'll always stand out in my mind because you're trying to keep a straight face, and you're like, well, you clearly got the wrong idea somewhere. But
it was actually later. They were okay. So Dark Horse had a deal with Universal where they were turning their what did they do? Mystery Men and I think Time Cop and
yes,
all that were being turned into movies. They said, well, let's try Ghost. And I said, well, right away, the title's going to be a problem. So it came back to bite me.
Yeah, but I feel like Dark Horse has been trying to pump out more and more stuff for like Netflix. This seems like the kind of thing that that would work really well in their trying to get more and more stuff out there.
Yeah.
Tell us about it, because this book at the time, and let me make sure if I got this right. So Dark Horse decided that they really wanted to kind of play in this shared superhero space. They had a lot of licensed content, and they really wanted to kind of do this. And they put some really top talent, yourself and others, on these books. How did it come about? Because you did was it true? You did the entire run of Ghost. That first
I did the first 3 years of it, and they stopped that run. And then shortly, but it came back later with a different concept and a different. I think the basic concept was the same, but there was a whole different supporting cast and a different thrust to the whole feel. So they were definitely trying a new direction. At the that initial run had sort of got to its natural conclusion.
It went 3 years, right?
Yes, right. It was like 36 issues. But yeah, it was an exciting time. I'd never written for comics before. It had only been screenplays and I think some animation scripts. But they said, "Here's what we're doing." They hadn't done superheroes up till that point, except for like dark versions that were comments on existing superheroes. So they wanted to do their own and started, just start a Stan Lee, Jack Kirby sort of shared universe, which everybody was nostalgic for and wanted to do it their way. So that they called all the writers and a lot of the artists into a roundtable discussion up in Milwaukee, and just sort of hammered it out. And all they had for Ghost was the one sentence that she's dead and she's looking for the person who killed her. And aside from that, just, take it in any direction.
Yeah.
There was, for a while there, or actually it was right around the time where there were these bad girls in comic books, and people were really exploring, girls with guns and girls who could beat up any guy and, all that stuff. So I was really aware of not just playing to those tropes, but I tried to narrate from her interior monologue as much as possible so I could get into. In fact, I got into the point where a reader was very angry, saying, "This is a woman masquerading. Eric Luke is actually an angry woman masquerading as a man, writing this comic book to take it out on all men everywhere." And I thought, yes, I've succeeded I know what that character is like. Anyway,
how charming! Charming '90s outrage. That's great.
Yeah. And there wasn't a huge online presence of angry male energy out there yet. So
yeah.
Well, it's the forefathers of current Twitter outrage. That's it's nice, but some things never change. It's always
yes.
How did you mentioned you hadn't done comics before? How'd they find you? How did you get this gig?
So I'd written Explorers, and I had as part of that shoot, Joe Dante had said, I'd said to him, I want to apprentice to this whole thing. I want this to be film school. And he said, absolutely. And we had a great friendship, and he invited me into every meeting and even up to ILM to just sit in on the whole post-production and effects. So Dark Horse had a deal with ILM to do the Star Wars comic books, or with Lucasfilm, and all those people were hanging out at ILM. And so I made some connections, and Mike Richardson and Randy Stradley said, if you ever want to write comic books, we're out here. And I'd been reading comic books since I was a kid and thought, yep, I want to do that. So that was my foot in the door. They gave me a special to write just to see if I could, if I knew the genre, and it was a success. So I was on board.
Nice. Well, now that you said that, I got to know what were the comics you liked growing up?
I was a DC kid. Like the first comic book I remember getting off the shelf at the. There weren't comic book stores back then. You had to go to the 7-Eleven or drugstore, and it was Batman, Superman. It wasn't even that. The Spider-Man angsty teenager stuff wasn't even. I mean, it was out there, but I really just got to know those, more two-dimensional superhero versions of the Silver Age. So then, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby blew my mind with Silver Surfer and all of that stuff, and I sort of grew up with them and seeing the possibilities of what damaged or darker characters could do. Not that they were that dark. And then stayed with it all the way up till Dark Knight and Watchmen, and again got my mind blown and thought, oh, this is legit now. This is, I get it.
Nice.
It feels like a lot. We've heard that Silver Surfer introduction seemed to catch a lot of people, like more than that was the moment where, obviously Lee and Kirby have been doing a lot, but that always plays on people's imaginations that got into comics. It's
well, you couldn't quite put into words. The visuals were so mind-boggling. But as a kid, you really had to ask, wait, what's going on here? Because it had all been representational up to that point. And pretty much, I guess Doctor Strange had some, and Jim Steranko was going off into whatever, haze his mind was in.
Yes.
But and anyway, it started there. And then when DC brought Kirby over for Fourth World and New Gods and Forever People, that again, I kind of rediscovered him as a visionary and thought, this is going on beyond. Oh, and Neil Adams stuff. Whenever he was doing something, I just pick it up no matter what it was. I think there was an Avengers where is it Ant-Man shrinks down and goes inside the Vision.
Yes. During the Kree-Skrull War,
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. And that was really cinematic, really great stuff.
Yeah, that was gorgeous, yeah.
Do you think, and it's not to kind of jump ahead, but do you think that we hear a lot of writers who are really inspired by, as you just described, a lot of very visual storytelling? Was the appeal as a kid like, I'm seeing these amazing visuals, I would love to write a story around that? We've just talked to a number of writers, really great writers like yourself, who were inspired, and their inspiration really draws from the art more than the story. In some cases, they always mention the art, and I think go hand in hand. But I'm just curious. That's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, it really was initially visual, and I couldn't draw. I really tried to draw, but it just didn't. I have it in my in my bones. Yeah. And looking back on it, the word balloons were always secondary to turning that page and seeing the panels or the splash page or whatever it was that just knocked you out. And then you went, okay, I got to find out what's going on here. And I still know some people who don't know how to read comic books. It's sort of overwhelming, and they don't get the pattern of how your eye moves across the page, all that stuff. But that was kind of instinctual. And so I never really thought I could be a part of creating comic books, because I had this idea in my head that it was all, really with the artist. So given the chance to actually write, and then of course the writers like Alan Moore and Frank Miller came out, and the writing was just as strong, if not stronger.
Oh, for sure.
I always thought on Watchmen, he was trying to constrain the art with his 9-panel pages and say, okay, I'm going to let a part of your brain relax because you can predict what the next page pretty much is going to look like.
Yes.
I want you to concentrate on the writing, on the narrative.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I think that was all part of the plan of how that book came together, and a lot of what captured people's imaginations. I just, I find it interesting that, writers see something like Kirby, and I maybe some part of the brain goes to, I want to create the story to match the imagination of what I'm seeing on this page, or I want to help shape. It's a fun play. Anyway, I'm sorry for getting off on a tangent. But you're doing screenplays, you're working for TV, and we definitely want to talk to you about some of that. But when you start writing for comics, you mentioned they give you this kind of tryout, this one-shot kind of story. How was it? Lots of comic writers today are talking about one day getting into TV. You're going kind of the opposite direction. You're going from TV and doing some things into comics. Was it hard? Did you struggle with that shift?
Well, so I've always thought of screenplays as blueprints for other people. What you're really trying to do is get somebody else to see the movie and get excited about it the way you are. So you're writing in descriptions that will grab the reader and make the reader see the movie in their head. And in that way, it's like I said, it's a blueprint for the finished work. So approaching comic books, that's kind of the same structure. You are providing a blueprint for the finished work. So you're still a couple of steps removed. And for writing screenplays, you're a lot of steps removed, because you have to get through executives to say, yeah, this is worth spending money on. And then it goes to, the director, the art department, everybody has, and then the editor. So you're like 10 steps, from the initial writing to what what an audience connects with. Yeah. The comic book writing, there are fewer steps between you. Everybody always just gave me complete freedom, there was Paul Kupperberg on Wonder Woman was great, and basically said, whatever you want to do, you're doing great, just keep doing that. And same at Dark Horse. They just gave me the 1-sentence description, and part of that is on me to keep track of continuity and make sure the character is true to, like Wonder Woman in particular. There's a tradition and there's a huge fan base, and you have to, you're not Alan Moore. You're not tearing down the icon. People love her, so you have to respect that. Yeah. And with Ghost, you were inventing her, so you had to, make her as open and identifiable as possible, so that people do want to care about her and do want to keep reading about her.
Yeah.
I think Ghost was one of the titles in the shared universe that seemed to, I don't want to say go over, but it captured people very quickly. There are a number of titles there, but Ghost felt like the one that had longevity to it.
It seems more remembered. Yeah.
It's a really strong concept. You can say the concept in one word, in one sentence, and so people get it right away. And plus, the Adam Hughes visuals were enough to make them stop and say, "Hey, it's Adam Hughes. Let me."
Oh, yeah.
And then Matt Haley was the guy I worked with for at least the first year on the interiors, and he was. I've been in touch with him over the years too. He was great to work with.
Thanks.
I wanted to say too about comic book writing that I had seen a script for Watchmen, one of the Alan Moore scripts, and in writing it, it was all caps, it was run-on sentences, it was just pouring out of his head. It was really dynamic to read. But Dave Gibbons had to go through and highlight what was actual visual description that he could work off of, because the whole thing was stream of consciousness up to a point.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, he's trying to communicate with the artist by being having as much of the creative impulse on the page as possible. So I tried to hold on to some of that. Give emotional impressions for the artwork, not just foreground, background description.
Yes. The series wound up. You worked with quite a large number of artists through the course of it. I mean, Adam Hughes launched the book, and then I think did a lot of the covers, or at least the initial covers, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I was just looking, kind of reminding myself of you wound up working with John Cassidy and Ivan Rice and Terry Dodson and like H.M. Baker. There's like a lot of people on here that are, have gone on to be just major forces in comics.
Yeah.
So it was actually quite. I had forgotten the amount of talent that was on this book for basically 3 years or so.
Although one thing that kept there wasn't continuity in the art, and people were, I think, trying to latch onto it, but the shifting art styles were a problem at one point.
I would think so. I mean, it's great art. You go from Doug Braithwaite to Ivan Rice to John Cassidy a few issues later. That's going to be a pretty big jump of styles.
Yes.
And I imagine that would be an issue, but it's odd to me just seeing such talent in a relatively short period of all over the place. That was quite remarkable, actually.
It was at one point they were giving work to some artists, I think in Sarajevo.
Oh wow!
And there was a language problem in artwork would come back and it had not been translated well, and so I don't think I had to rewrite. But that was how disjointed. I didn't have a direct connection with any one artist. There were a couple that that really stand out. The Dr. October issues were really fun to write. I had her narrate, and her language is not it's all fractured. So she's speaking in impressions and in odd English. Okay, so Scott Benefiel on Dr. October and I had a real connection, and he had these nightmarish images that completely matched her disjointed narration, and sort of surreal. She didn't have a good grasp on reality, and Scott really captured that. And we're still good friends, even after 20 years or plus.
Yeah,
he's great.
And we mentioned you worked on some animation stuff, and I'd love to talk a little bit about that, because that's one of those things where it's like I was a fan of your work before I knew who you were, because I grew up, and not to make anyone feel old, I apologize, but I grew up watching Gargoyles and Tales of the Crypt Keeper. And so what was it like working on those shows as a writer of some of the episodes?
So Gargoyles was Disney's big push to have a dark animation show, because the Warner Brothers Batman animation had been really great, really striking. And I always remember one of the a piece of artwork they were trying to sell. It shows a kid with a Mickey Mouse balloon looking up, and there's the shadow of the gargoyle over him, and he's like, scared to death, which Disney, that had never been their image before. So they wanted their Batman, and here's what they came up with. So that concept was really set. And when I started working with them, they needed that 4-part origin arc. And that was my contribution, was bringing that to life. But they were very clear about what they wanted, and it wasn't like a checklist, but all of that stuff needed to be in there. Yeah. So I did lots of development work for Disney, and after I left Paramount on Explorers, I followed Jeffrey Katzenberg and Michael Eisner over to Disney and was on staff there for a while. So I was sort of doing script doctoring there. Mm-hmm. And when I moved to Gargoyles, it was very similar. It was really fleshing out what they had a very clear vision when I walked in. So if I brought some of myself to that, that's good to know. But they were happy with it anyway.
It did really well. I mean, it was a show. It did accomplish to some extent what Disney was trying to do, was to kind of get them back on the map for kids animations, with something that's kind of pushing the boundaries a little bit more edgy. And I don't know if that's edgy. It's hard to edgy is not the right word. It sounds much more weighty, I think, than what was going on. But I like that darker kind of universe.
Yeah, edgy means something completely different these days. The edge is so much farther beyond what we were trying to be edgy with back then.
It was, I mean, a much sharper edge, I guess. That's the right way to put it. How was it you're writing? I mean, what was the boundary like? You're writing a kid show, but they're telling you how to put. I mean, like, that's got to be kind of a complicated thing to try and work out of how far you push and where you push. Like, how do you identify where the boundaries are?
Well, back when I was writing for them, there's a very clear set. Once you enter kids animation, I had a show called Cyber 9, which I wrote and executive produced, and was part of the creators over at Fox. And the rules were, and of course, that was Saturday morning, so you could not show contact. If one character is hitting another one, that had to happen off screen.
Interesting.
There were, there could not be a replicable weapon. It had to be outsized. So it was okay for somebody to have a huge ray gun, but not a ray gun that was small enough to be a handgun. That might all be different now. I haven't done that in a while, but it was really specific. And then there could not be more screen time for the vehicle or the toy than there were for the characters, because if they didn't have that restriction, then entire half-hour shows would be like half-hour commercials. Yeah. So this was a restriction saying, no, you have to concentrate on character and engage kids on a different level than just, forcing these plastic things down there.
Not be a complete commercial for. But I had heard once, I don't know if you could confirm this or if it's true or kind of urban legend, but that there was something about you couldn't have the show go into commercial and then right into an ad for the toy. You had to almost end your scene in a way that wasn't going to just bleed into a commercial for the toy.
Yes. No, you had to be really clear when you were selling something or when you were telling a story. Yeah. And we got story notes for that too. Things I wasn't even aware of walking in, but that was a real roller coaster.
How many, was it just tons of revisions? You're putting this out and you're getting these notes and you're going back and forth. Like, how long did this whole process take?
With animation, everything is moving so incredibly fast that there's only time for so many notes before it has to go to the next, to storyboarding and the next step. So that was one limitation. But aside from that, there were rooms full of executives sitting around tables, giving notes. What can I say?
That was a fascinating time. And then you did Tales from the Crypt Keeper, which had to have been, actually that was before Gargoyles, right? Or
God, I can't remember now. Yeah. It may have been. That was up in the offices for that were up in Canada. So I would it was all long distance, sending the paragraph about what they wanted to be the show. I'd flesh it out into the beats, send that up, and they'd say, like this, you don't like this. okay, you're good to go. And then I'd do a script based on that. So again, I was handed the kernel of the idea. Mm-hmm. And if I was able to bring something to it, some humor or something that I felt, okay, there's enough of me in there, then that was, that got to be rewarding.
What kind of, I know you were just telling us the restrictions on the other show, but for, Tales for the Crypt Keeper, I'm sure like a horror cartoon must have had some really bizarre kind of, you have to scare the kids a little bit, but not really. And you have to, what kind of restrictions were on that?
Oh, God, if I remember correctly, I don't think the dead could return. No, the dead had to be able to return to life, but it was something odd like that. Like, don't let them question some of the basic, things that we know about the way the world works or the universe works. Yeah, there was some real dancing around to say exactly what the scary thing was. I mean, it wasn't the Scooby-Doo thing where somebody pulls off a mask and, it's the old man guarding his farm or something. But it by the end, there was always had to be the feeling of it's okay, kids. It's not scary. It's not that scary.
You couldn't let the kids kind of wander off on their own with this horror still hanging out there. You had to resolve it level.
That's it. It couldn't be that Twilight Zone thing of giving you the creeps and then you had to sort of walk away thinking about it. Yeah, it all had to be tied up by the end.
Put it all back in the box.
Yeah. I do love that note, though, that kind of like vague note, like, don't make children question the greater known universe. It's like,
well, you're going to get some upset parents if they come in asking questions about the dead coming back to life. So, and that was an odd thing about TV. Network TV was that they didn't want to lose viewers, which is very different from now saying we actually want cutting edge stuff that will attract viewers. So we want to be the weirdest show on TV, the most violent show on TV, whatever, the most romantic show, and back then it was be the stay on an even keel, be the blandest show that you can so people don't turn it off, which is really different than saying, oh, I have a million things that I could be watching, but I've heard this one is really exciting.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's
better now.
Kind of keep the audience more than grow the audience, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, there's less competition, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
But so kind of bouncing back and forth. Then when you do comics, you were left to your own devices? I mean, I imagine there was a lot less notes that you'd have to deal with.
Yes, that's true. But now that we're talking about the other thing, I remember with Ghost thinking, I want to push this as far as I want to attract readership.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because there were a lot of comic books. There was a collector's market that was really taking off with variant covers and all of that.
Well, and thank goodness it's much different today.
Yes. There you go. Well, I'll tell you what happened. My entire comic book collection, which I had in Mylar bags and I had it in storage, I got a call from the storage place one day and said, Mr. Luke, your space has been broken into and they've taken some stuff. And I went over that. All the comic books were gone. Somebody had backed up a truck. I mean, it was not a small comic book collection.
Oh,
because when I was working for DC and for Dark Horse, they would send me every issue of every comic book that was being published, so I'd be aware of continuity that what other characters were going through.
Oh man!
And yeah, and so I called up my insurance company and I said, "Okay, time has come to evaluate my," because I had never put a value on it, and I went through the titles and numbers, and all of the value had gone way, way, way down. Mm-hmm. And I said, "What's going on here?" And the insurance guy said, this is right around the time when everybody who put them in Mylar bags back then has now said, okay, it's time to cash in. And there's a glut and everything has just gone back down to, what it was before. Yeah. So that's where all my comic book collecting got me.
I would have been tempted to try and get to local shops around the area and figure out who just sold a big run from your stuff.
I was thinking about that, but also I kind of felt a weight lift off. I had been carrying that around from house to house and from storage unit, and I'd always thought, well, how am I going to deal with all this? So I got a lump sum, not for as much as I'd hoped.
I've talked to many people. I know one guy, he had a tree fall in his house, and then it started a fire and it burned the house down.
Oh my God.
He's like, oh, it's terrible. You lost all this stuff. It's like, but like you said, it's like the weight's off. I got to check, and now I start free again. And it was interesting to hear that perspective, but
yeah. That was it.
Cool. So with Ghost, though, I've got to imagine did you have people from Dark Horse writing you notes saying things like, hey, we're trying to connect this universe more, can you shuffle things around, or was it just on you?
No, it was really nice. They really just gave me the freedom. Again, I was starting from square one with the character.
Yeah.
So all the supporting cast, all the issues, all of the villains I was setting up, those were all being invented for the first time. And even crossovers, when they never said we need this to cross over here, or I think maybe there was one event that needed to be referenced, but it wasn't, something that affected the continuity in a big way. But they gave me a lot of freedom. When I pushed it towards a darker, more sort of psychosexual, space, they were fine with that. Nobody ever said, hey, pull that back. They really, one call from Randy Strandley said, are you okay?
Oh no.
All right. Yes.
Well, in this industry, that's not the most, unreasonable question, I guess.
Yeah. That's true.
People would check in more often sometimes.
Yeah.
You had a lot of fun with the book. I mean, you look back, was this just thinking of kind of doing your work in TV, then going into doing this comic run? Did it feel, liberating? Did it feel like a great place to be?
Yeah. I mean, to be given that kind of trust and that kind of freedom was pretty amazing. The step beyond that was when I started writing novels. After that, the novel's a direct conduit to the reader. What you're putting on the page goes directly to the final product, to what they're creating in their head. So I wrote this book called Interference.
Yes.
It's about an audio book that's killing the people who are listening to it, and you realize that's the book that you're listening to.
Yes.
So I did an audiobook version of it that was on the bestseller list at Audible for a little bit.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that was really rewarding. It was really a great experience, maybe even more than screenplay writing.
Nice. Very nice. That book got a lot of promotion up here, at least in the Pacific Northwest, I remember. And it was that an audiobook that kills you, that you can listen to on audiobooks. And it was,
yes.
It gave you pause actually for checking out this book, but it was a great concept.
And that was part of the concept initially writing it. I thought the end form of this is going to be an audiobook. And I'd been volunteering doing lots of narration for Braille Institute. And so I had my chops as a narrator and thought, I can do this, and put it together and sent it to Audible, and it was a hit.
That's cool. It's a good book. I remember there was a decent amount. I think The Stranger covered it a couple of places. The media up here in Seattle covered it, and it was like everybody loved the concept. Just of
that's great.
I think this would be a few years after The Ring and movies like that, some of those adaptations. So it was just kind of the fun for books to kind of get its turn of something that would be dangerous to read.
I'd never seen that before, and really, audiobooks themselves. I was realizing as I was starting to get into them, because I really like them.
Yeah.
It's that, when was the last time that we had somebody read something to us, read a whole book? It was when we were kids.
Yeah.
And before we could really read for ourselves. So that idea of a parent's voice reading to you, and you get lost in it, and you totally are captured by this thing. That's a really powerful medium. And so I thought, why not take advantage of this and, try and write something really scary.
I know. Excellent. I think, so you write this book and then it's completely on you, and that is completely freeing. You get to do these. I'm curious, as Ghost kind of winds down or after it ends, you then you move to DC. And how was that? Was it a very different experience? How was, because you not only moved to DC, you moved to DC and Wonder Woman.
Yeah. That was a call out of the blue. Paul Kupperberg called up and said, hey, I've been reading Ghost and we're looking for our next writer on Wonder Woman. Are you interested? And I said, absolutely. I wasn't a huge Wonder Woman fan, but she, as part of the DC, the top three, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, I'd always been fascinated by her. Sure. But I hadn't bought every issue or anything like that. And so, again, they gave me one special to write as a tryout. They were real happy with that. And so I was on board. Nice. Paul, again, gave me a lot of freedom. I didn't get very many notes at all. And
really? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, it's funny because we've mostly talked to people that John Byrne came in and took over from them, but you came on after John Byrne.
Yeah, he sort of set everything back to zero before he left, and I thought, oh, thanks, I appreciate that. I don't have to deal with a lot of his continuity threads that were left hanging.
Did you get to talk to him at all, or it was just all through Paul, and just Paul was like, here's what it is, and
it was all through Paul. And in fact, he was even saying, what are you thinking about what direction to take? So I've always gone through, with superheroes, you need to understand, again, what is the kernel? What's the heart of what they're all about? And I get Batman. As a kid, I got Batman. It's revenge for the parents. And I get Superman just, as an ideal, and also sacrificing himself for this home that is not his own, will never be his own. Yet he's given those, those Midwestern American values through the farm work. And so he tries to apply those to this world. With Wonder Woman, I didn't really get it. She's made out of clay. She's grown up not as a human, but as something more than human. As a warrior, and raised in this sort of military environment, and then given the mission to go out and bring peace to the world of man, which is an impossible task. You just know, just say that sentence, it's not going to work. And yet she keeps striving and striving and striving. So I thought, okay, there's something to be working against impossible odds.
Yeah.
And you can play her as a fish out of water, that she was raised this one way in this, ancient mythic thing, and she has to deal with the modern world when she leaves the island. So you can play those things. But I really tried to take it back to the myth. What's the basic myth that she was born from, and how does that play out? Because it had sort of gotten lost for a while about what's her mission. And in some cases, the supporting cast got more interesting. She was kind of a cipher. So I really wanted her to question herself and her quest in man's world to stop war.
But you did it in a way that I think a lot of other people who have before since haven't been able to do, which is you handled that and her questioning things, but it wasn't about she's been lied to this whole time. Because it seems like everyone goes back to that well of I've been lied to or deceived, instead of a broader sort of, it's not about being lied to or not, it's about seeking the truth, and truth isn't always something hidden in lies. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it's sort of like she should deal with the prime question. Even no matter what the details are, it should always go to the heart of. I mean, if there's a lie, then she's dealing with things that even we know are not true.
Yeah. Right.
But if you go right to the heart of it, if she goes, how do you get people to stop war, to stop fighting? That's a really interesting, concept. And it's not the most popular one for a comic book character, because you want combat, you want Batman, you want, him to bring vengeance to the cowardly lot. But, Wonder Woman's trying to stop the fight. So
and you worked that storyline in just a little bit before Dan Jurgens did a similar thing in Thor about him coming, bring Midgard down and then trying to sort of police the world and all that. You beat him to it by a year or so, which was interesting.
Beat him to it with and that's Jurgens' run is great as well, but with I think a lot more nuance. I love the inherent contradiction that you kind of touched on your run, and you just mentioned here, of you're trained to fight, you're trained to be a warrior, you're trained to kill in some cases, and then your mission is to get people not to kill and not to fight. And then you're sent out into a world where it's completely foreign to you. And so you're on no stable ground, and you're told your mission is to do the opposite of kind of what you were trained to do. And with so many contradictions, what do you do? And I thought you handled that really, really well. It was one of the core takes on the character.
Yeah.
Going back, it's been 20 years. And so I was going back and going through it. The one, excuse me, let's see. They chose this for a celebration of 75 years. Mm-hmm. It's a story where it's obviously the Middle East, but it's called, it's the line in the sand, and there are people fighting over the land itself. And she is going to go in there and try and stop this war. And she can't. And they wind up shooting at her because she's wearing red, white, and blue and all that. And so she finally takes that lasso of truth and puts it to good use and thinks, well, if they know the truth about each other, then how can they fight each other? And so these two leaders that she's grabbed off of the battlefield, she, puts the lasso, ties them each to one end, and they know each other's feelings, and they know, each other's pain. And the last page, they're shaking hands, and there's going to be a treaty, and then they're blown up by their followers who say that they're traitors, and all traitors must die.
Yeah,
and it ends there. So how do you do that?
That's one of the more powerful story, let alone Wonder Woman stories. It's one of the more powerful stories that's come out. I love and despise that ending. I mean,
I couldn't.
I love the ending.
I was realizing there's no believable ending that you can write.
Right.
It's how do you do it? And I realized she can't do it. Maybe we can do it in the real world with everybody. God knows, but as a comic book character, she can't go in and do that.
Yeah. But one of the other early things you did in your run was you kind of revolutionized the invisible jet and did a lot of stuff with that, with the Wonder Dome. And how'd that come about?
So the jet was always a problem. I mean, the 30s were comic books were so fantastical. Superman had the city in the bottle and all of this sort of wonderful stuff. And she had an invisible plane. And it's, back then planes were cool. Just to have a plane itself was, was new enough. So kids were excited just by the concept of, an invisible one. I mean, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but you have to deal with it. So my mind just went off and, took that to not a logical conclusion, but just tried to expand it into something And also, she had never had a bat cave or fortress of solitude.
Yeah.
So I thought, yeah, give her something. And it couldn't be rooted in any one particular place of Earth, because the Earth is her battle, her domain for peace. Yeah. So I had it floating above it. And then I gave it a personality too, because it was thinking.
Floating above the city, kind of like Midgard was in Jurgen's run. But just that level of creativity with something like that, I think is something that a lot of people like seeing in comics. I think that's part of what got Donny Cates really popular recently, has been sort of his like kind of doing similar kind of things, where you're taking an idea of something and really stretching it to the limits of the imagination. But so you're working on Wonder Woman with what is it? A Yannick? I'm going to butcher his last name.
Paquette,
yeah. And he's someone who's still closely associated with Wonder Woman. He's doing the Earth One Wonder Woman stories with Grant Morrison, who's also known for stretching the limits of the imagination. You would think, since Yannick has that high profile of being known as a Wonder Woman artist, that this would be a great time with the 80th anniversary of Wonder Woman for them to roll out a collection of your run. I'm sure even if they highlight Yannick over you, I'm sure you wouldn't mind, as long as it was out.
Not at all. Yeah. Oh no, Yannick was just starting out when I was first, and talk about writing to someone in the script and getting to know the artist, and sending personal notes to him. I'm going to describe this in terms of that conversation we had. His career is amazing. It's just stellar. So we're still friends. After all this time, but a collection would be fantastic.
Yeah, it's weird because the Byrne run is collected, and then Phil Jimenez's run is collected, and Perch and I have talked about this a lot. We get pushback sometimes because people act like, "What are you talking about? Everything's collected and easily accessible," and it's not.
No,
but
not at all. Yeah.
People don't know that because they just assume whatever's out there is what's out there.
Yeah,
Well, or I think you can find all of your work easily accessible on various piracy sites, but not through PC or collected. So it's like you get your hands on it, but not in a way that is making the company money. And I think with the Wonder Woman films and your run, as I'm kind of thinking back on it, I'm looking at the biography here of the work that you did. Like it fits very well with the films that have come out. I mean, different topics, but the core of the character. Your run is actually more true to a core of the character than other runs around it.
Yeah.
I tried to take it back to basics, and of course they had to do that for the first film. Mm-hmm. I mean, in everybody's head was Linda Carter and Wonder Woman as either this sort of kitschy, pop culture, but not a character that you would take seriously.
Yeah.
So they really had to cast it right. They had to get the tone right. There had to be enough humor in it to, and it had to be epic. Mm-hmm. And it also involved Ares and the mythology.
Right.
Yeah. So, God, I thought that first film was great. I mean, I was like every once in a while I'll be watching a film and I'll just tear up because they've done something so well, no matter what kind of scene, right?
No, I know that feeling. The visuals, the music, the story, everything kind of comes together, and it's perfect craft at that moment.
Yep.
And,
Yep. And knowing how many hurdles you have to get over in order to get to that moment, and here somebody did it. I had several of those moments in the first Wonder Woman. I thought, God, they got that right.
Yeah.
So my hats off.
No, I think like Joe and I have talked about when we talked to Bill Loebs, there's this issue in Flash, the Nobody Dies issue, which is kind of this one issue very core to the character it represents. This issue you're just talking about in the Middle East with Wonder Woman trying to strive for peace and kind of how the impossibility of the task. This comic is one of those that stands alone I mean, there's certainly elements throughout your run, but it stands on its own, and it's a powerful moment for the character.
Yeah.
Just great work. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think your run's also influenced a bunch of other runs since then. I think Brian Azzarello and Cliff Chang's run, is certainly influenced. I think a lot of the characters they created and new sort of villains are really different riffs on Kronos's children. I think you see a lot of like devastation and characters like that in that run. What was it like creating this devastation, bringing in Kronos and all that?
Yeah. Well, I went back to the first 5 issues ever, and looked at what they were trying to do, and all of her, either she's fighting Nazis or there's some pretty silly costume characters.
Yeah, sure,
and she never gets her Joker or her Lex Luthor, and so I tried to, with Devastation, I was trying to come up with that. It was she has a parallel origin. She has the gifts given to her by the dark gods instead of the light gods, she runs completely counter to everything that Wonder Woman's about. Anyway, that's what I was trying to. That she was supposed to be the Joker to Diana. And and that's what she was. One of the things I was looking at to see if she stuck after I left. And so she's still a character in some of the resource books and references. So
she was fantastic. And you also brought in the Hindu pantheon.
That was interesting, because I'm a big fan of Bollywood and of how the gods get involved in those movies in everyday life. And I thought, why not? Why? I mean, and they're equivalents to some of the Greek gods, gods of good humor, gods of wine, vengeful gods, all this stuff. It just seems so rich. And I did get a note on that be careful with this, because people are worshiping these gods but continually since. And to be careful that this isn't seen as sacrilege. So I let it play out and, research that as much as I could to try and pay respect to that and still make it fun and dynamic.
I don't remember any outrage at that time. I don't remember anybody getting upset. No Twitter probably helped a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, because they've recently introduced Yara Flor, who's this Brazilian Amazonian. But kind of the way it rolled out, it felt like they were announcing, like, finally, there's a new pantheon of Brazilian gods that are going to join. Like, finally, they're expanding Wonder Woman's mythology. It was like, well, you did that like a couple of decades ago.
Yeah. It didn't make
yes.
It didn't make much of a splash, but it was really fun to play with that, with huge concepts like that. Cosmic concepts. Getting back to Silver Surfer and all that.
Yeah. Was there, you enjoyed your time in both companies. Were there some fundamental differences between a company like Dark Horse, a company like DC that really struck you?
Mike Richardson and Randy Stradley were right at the top of Dark Horse, and they were dealing with me directly. And so that was different. At DC, I only ever dealt with Paul and not up the chain of command. But at both, I was off, playing in my own sandbox over here. There wasn't much, there weren't many notes or changes.
It sounds like they left you to your own devices for all, as long as you were telling us a powerful story, that you were able to kind of do what you needed. I meant to actually ask you. Joe mentioned earlier kind of this evolution of what you did with the Invisible Jet and kind of the different things around Wonder Woman. Was there a part of you that it reminded you a little bit of kind of your work doing screenplays and doing kid cartoons, where you're introducing, in theory, kind of more vehicles, more toys to play with? I remember kind of looking back on that, going, this feels like stuff that if you wanted to, you could put this in a cartoon, you could start selling merchandise and other things around it. Was that at all part of the influence, or
that Cyber9 washed all of that stuff out of me? That was the biggest pain in the ass for dealing with, first of all, quality of the toy. Like the toy designs came in on the vehicles for Cyber9, and they were dumbed down, and they had so I worked on Cyber9 with two guys I met at ILM, Nilo Rodis and Phil Norwood. And Nilo Rodis is one of the big names in the original Star Wars design field. Yeah. And here they had him right there, and he was, sending them designs, and they weren't looking at them. They went to their own toy designers. And
that's sad.
It was frustrating, yeah. And the toys did not sell well. They're collector's items now, in bargain bins every once in a while. But yeah, I'd had enough of the toy market. That was only with Wonder Woman. It was only ever meant to be a big concept within the world building, right?
Yeah, and one of the few older Wonder Woman villains you brought back was Dr. Poison.
Dr. Poison.
Yeah. I think that was that Dr. Poison's first appearance post-crisis, or I think so.
Yeah. I mean, I had to dig way, way, way back. I actually went back to the original, 30s Dr. Poison.
Yeah, that was the design of the character.
Yeah, and then she's gone on since, but I always thought, hey, that's great. I brought her back, and then she was even in the movie.
Yeah.
And so, I felt a little pride at that for bringing her. Oh, the other thing was in the second Wonder Woman, they brought back the Kingdom Come armor.
Yeah.
And I had always, I said, hey, can I use this in regular continuity? They said, yeah, go for it. So I, felt some responsibility for bringing that into the, not just in Kingdom Come, but also in the book.
Yeah.
And even the designer, the costume designer said, oh, I went back and read issues, blah, blah, which were issues that I had brought it out in. So
yeah,
that was great.
That's awesome. When they were doing any of that, did anybody get in touch with you when they were doing these movies, or oh, that's a shame. I wish they would have tapped into some of your ideas.
No, I've been out of there, for a while, and if anybody went back and was reading old issues for reference, so that's why I was happy that the armor was preserved in there.
What kind of projects are you working on today? What do you have going on?
So I'm continuing to write. The Interference was such a great experience, and it paid off well. So I'm working on the next one, and it's another concept that can only exist, or that should be experienced as an audiobook.
Oh, excellent.
Because you can create images with sound. And I think on Interference, there are 2 or 3 instances where I actually did bring in sound design and production, just very subtly to illustrate something. And so I'm exploring that more.
It's the right time. Audiobooks are having a huge surge right now in the market. So that's great to hear. I love would you go and do, are there any comics that you feel like you have in you that you'd really love to do still?
So with Phil Norwood from ILM, the very first story I ever did was in Dark Horse Presents. We had a sort of a science fiction action short piece, and I actually wrote all of the captions on white squares and placed them on the panel for the first time, so I could see how sentence fragments could interact with the action and lead your eye down the page. And I wasn't just writing a script. I was actually interacting with the art as Phil had already created it and said, hey, I need some dialogue for this. And I wound up doing a lot more. I discovered what you could do with internal monologue. Mm-hmm. Because in films, it's really, you look at the Blade Runner monologue that they thought would fix it in the first version of with Harrison Ford's voiceover, and it's horrible. The final version with no interior monologue is the best one. But in comic books, it works because you are reading it, not hearing it. So it's not like spoon feeding. It's like you can get inside the character's head. And when I was not getting Wonder Woman, I thought, you know what, I'm going to write as much of this internal monologue as I can and try and find her voice. So it's a great tool as a writer too, to try and discover that.
Nice.
Very nice. I like that you push so hard to get to the core of the character. I do think there's this tendency at times to want to say, I need to introduce something new. I need to put my mark on. So I got to take it in a new direction. I got to break something in order to kind of stand out. Whereas your approach, as you're describing it, is no, it's the opposite. Actually, I've got to get to the center of the character and kind of make my mark that way. And I think your run holds up really well as a result.
Yeah.
Thanks. It's like with Watchmen, the core of that was these Charlton superheroes that they gave to Alan Moore and said, what can you do with this? And he ripped them apart. He but he understood. He went right to the heart of each character and started to, disassemble them but with a complete understanding of it. And you can't do that to Wonder Woman. You can't do that to Batman or Superman. But you have to understand what's driving them in every panel before you can write them. And then you can put your own spin on it. But you have to get it right before you earn that.
Yeah. Speaking of your own spin on established heroes, you actually contributed a little bit to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle lore, I believe, in the early 2000s cartoon.
Yeah, they flew us back to the East Coast to meet with Peter Laird, and spent a few days with him, looking at just talking to him about what his idea was. He wanted, with that particular startup, to get much darker, which everybody remembering the old Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was just the adventure, or how, that they were. Well, it was all supposed to be, initially it was a satire of the Frank Miller Daredevil, and it took off on its own, so popular that it became its own thing. So once again, I was getting on board something that was completely established, and I'd get notes that Raphael just wouldn't say this. Raphael just wouldn't do this, and I went, okay, I'm writing, for your vision. So just tell me what to do.
Nice.
I'm very impressed at the breadth of what you've done. I just, from the film work to the TV work to the comics to this book, it's a wide assortment of material. I mean, kind of in the kid space for cartoons, this kind of let's do something for kids but break the kids model for Gargoyles, to kind of this character who's dead and out for vengeance, which is a terrible quick description, but of Ghost and Wonder Woman. Like,
yeah, that's fair.
But you go from property to property. They're very different arcs, and the common thread is extremely strong characterization that you brought to the table with everything, and that's really, really remarkable. All of your work.
Thanks.
So but all things considered, a relatively short span in comics. I apologize if I'm probing, but there's a desire to go back and do another 3-year run or arc on anyone, or
it was so okay. So after the end of Wonder Woman, there was a period where I thought, let's try to keep the ball rolling. And there was, for 5 seconds, there was an agent involved and was reaching out, and nothing ever really happened. and whatever reason, the industry was not in good shape.
Right.
And I felt like I was spinning my wheels, and I thought, I'm just going to push ahead where, this is getting frustrating. So if the time was right, but there's so much of your career as a creative person working in different fields has to be spent just pushing and pushing. At least 50% of you is selling yourself to try to get the next job. It's always worked for me from Explorers on, in that I write my own thing, I make it as good as I can, and then that gets enough attention so that I get more work from it. If I go out and knock on doors, was some of the most frustrating periods of my life. So
yeah, but someone like you, there's probably a few publishers out there that if you had to create your own thing with your experience, if you had a pitch or something, we're like, hey, would you be interested? I wouldn't be shocked if one or two wanted to publish something from you.
Hey, thanks. I'll
yeah, but I
right
mean,
after
like,
we hang up, I'll start. I'll put that in the old.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It is definitely. I think right now comics is. We are going through another transformation period, kind of at this moment, and I think there is more interest and people seeking to try and find really strong characterization and people who can really get to kind of a core of a character, something that can be kind of understood in a quick elevator pitch for why you want this comic and build something that way. And so I think you're the right guy for the right moment. You just got to get some properties. And I completely understand if you're off having to really pressure to get into the industry, that's going to take away a lot of that creative drive. But I'm hoping some people reach out to you, because I think you've got some stories to tell in there that'd be incredible right now.
Yeah.
Thanks. It's also so much. So much of the movie industry uses comic books as a selling tool, like an easily understood visual, and so many of them have been successful movies. That I imagine that one sentence that you're talking about, the elevator pitch, is really, really different than the comic book industry used to be.
Oh yeah. And I think we'll continue to kind of drift in that direction. Eric, I want to be respectful of your time. You've given us more than an hour now, and I just want to thank you for talking to us and kind of walking us through some of these things you've done.
Thank you for reaching out. This has really been fun. Thank you.
No problem. This is great.
We'll definitely keep very connected to the material you're doing, and when the new book is out, we'd love to hear from you and make sure that people know it's out there and kind of put a plug into that. I think some people are definitely going to want to get in and check out Interference if they haven't already. So you can get that on Audible, Amazon, right? And others?
Yes. Well, it was published on Amazon, and so the audiobook is on Audible. It's searchable. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, please go check that out. If you haven't seen this, either Ghost or this Wonder Woman run we've been talking about, I would say go run out and buy the trade, but that
but it's not there yet.
I think it's on Comixology.
Yes.
But you have to work when there's no trade and find the numbers and go through that. So but you might actually be able to just type in Eric Luke into Comixology, and that might be the best way to do it.
You can get some if you haven't read Wonder Woman. It's I'll edit this if I'm wrong later. 142. This is this issue we're talking about. It's definitely one to check out for Wonder Woman with this Middle Eastern conflict, and it's really to the core of the character in one issue. So I would definitely suggest that. But Eric, thank you again very much for chatting with us, and we hope to hear from you really soon.
Yeah.
Thanks again. It was really fun. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much.